Whew. I had to take a deep breath because the conversation started before we pressed record. And yo, when I tell you mind blown already, like,
Yeah,
yo,
yeah.
y'all lives
Let's
are
be
about to
real.
whole change with this next guest. Like, whole change. Not only is she a sociologist and an author, but she is a dope. And when I say dope, I mean it on like the highest level, like, because this levels to dopeness, right? So this is like level number 10
Mhm.
of just magic. And I don't like calling Black women magic because it takes away their humanity. However, you got to call a spade a spade. This woman right here is whole magic. I mean, Danny, like, yo,
Yeah,
we
yeah. I mean, I already have chills, and you guys know when I have chills, that means that it is just an amazing conversation. So I already have chills, and we haven't even started yet. So I am very, very excited. I just want to jump right in. Come on, bring it in.
okay. We're going to bring her on. This episode is reparenting while parenting, primarily because, especially if you are a person who is Black, or you are a person of color, or you have lived and are working your way through elements of trauma, and you want to do things differently with your children or with the young people that you have decided that you will nurture and service. It requires you to do some very real internal work, and you got to work through your shit. And sometimes that shit is so thick that it
You
causes
need a little help. You need a little help. You need a little
some
guidance.
resistance.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we are going to bring her on to the show. Again, super excited about this. Dr. Janice Johnson Dias, how are you?
I am good. How are you? I had to change my earrings. I felt like it needed a different vibe.
There's a little
I'm
zhuzh.
here for it. I'm here for it.
Listen, I should have put me on a bigger earring so I can get a little zhuzh. A little, we just
You
gonna
know,
let the
I had a little judge. I'm on your vibe. I got a little
yeah.
judge.
First
Yeah.
of all, you have it all the way together. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. The
Yes.
conversation was lovely, and I'm excited to be in conversation and dialogue with y'all.
I am too. We really do like to start every show just asking, primarily because so many other things inform who we are, what we do, our titles, that we sometimes forget to decide and determine to express who we are. Like, hey, this is who I am. This is who I say I am. So we always like to start each episode with asking, who do you say you are?
Ooh, that's. I mean, I say a lot of different things. It depends on who's asking. But I almost always think of myself as a champion bubbler. I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am I am a kid from a really rural place. I am Jamaican. I almost all in the US context, or even when I go abroad, I really like people to know that I am Jamaican. It means a lot to me to be Jamaican. My Jamaican friends laugh. They said, like, she said with such seriousness. And I'm very, very serious about being Jamaican.
Every Jamaican is very serious about being Jamaican.
Real serious, right?
The pride is real. It's real.
It's just real. I am also really serious about being a person who identifies as a woman, um,
Mm.
and what that means, because um, I take to task the idea that people who are women and girls are still globally thought of as secondary citizens,
Yeah.
and that irritates me terribly. I am an educator. I like to learn.
Mhm.
I share what I learn, and I do that almost every single day in one way or another. Um, I am also a strategist. I spend a lot of time talking to people about strategy, how they can think about the long arc of things, whether it is from political advising, organizational advising, philanthropy advising. Is that I like to think about strategy more than I like to think about tactics, even though tactics are essential to achieving strategic goals. And I am a mother, and I am a mother in a couple of different ways. I mother the child that, came out of my vagina. I also mother and care for children as something that I've chosen as a part of my life, is because I think mothering is not just for people who come out of their vaginas or belly, but I think mothering is a specific kind of labor that requires attention. So, those are the ways that I primarily think about myself, other than I am a great friend. Like, I'm a great friend. I'm a person you want as your friend. I I am brazen in terms of my personality. I am not at all shy. I think shyness has no value. Um, and I am working on being less brutally honest.
Me too.
On days that I fail, I'm like, well, it's better to be honest than not honest. And I am evolving in a lot of different ways. I think sometimes people think of me as an athlete. Sometimes I think of myself as an athlete. But and when I look at my belly on certain days, I'm like, maybe not so athletic. Um, but I am a person who has a very keen and simple superpower.
Yes.
I am present to life every day, and I enjoy life every day in every way. And I am, it's not that I'm unapologetic. I am really good at apologizing when I make errors, but I am not my ancestors' wildest dreams. I think their wildest dreams was freedom, but I think I would make them very proud. So,
Wow. Okay.
whoa.
Well, all righty then.
It's the fact that, yes,
Best answer that we have. I mean, and we get great answers. I don't, I was just thinking while we were talking off the air, how I don't know what we've done, Alicia, to deserve the guests that we have gotten, but the people that we attract to this podcast or that we just happen to get on here is like, how do I even get to know or interact or share space with like these amazing people? And I'm just like, this is like, it just reinforces and 100% confirms how much of this is walking in our purpose, because there's just no other way that we could attract this level of human. Like it's such a blessing. It really is.
insane. Insane. And the fact that you just reframed, I am not my ancestors' wildest dream because their wildest dream was freedom, it completely and totally changed things for me, because it's like,
Yeah.
how egotistical of you to feel as though you were what they were dreaming of. No, they were dreaming of not being shackled, not having their children
Mentally, physically, emotionally, financially.
They were dreaming of their own freedom, because your first fight is supposed to be for oneself. So what we're saying essentially when we say I'm my ancestors' wildest dream, that they gave up their desire to live and just wanted something for you. And that's just not,
It's arrogance at its highest level.
it is.
Um,
When you said it, it never came to me until you literally like broke that down in a simple, I think you said maybe 3, 4, 5 words. Like, yeah.
I mean, I think that we are an embodiment of what they hope for the future. I feel grateful to think that our ancestors wanted a world in which where we could be mentally, spiritually, economically free.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a high level of arrogance in the phrasing, to not realize that we must always, and our ancestors did, they needed to survive first.
Yeah.
They needed that. We couldn't be here if their wildest dream wasn't the first step.
Yeah.
And the first step is ensuring your own basic survival. And they
Yeah.
did that so that we could be arrogant. So, and I feel very grateful for that. And I carry that with me every single day. In every way. I feel honored to be the personification of many things that they wish for, but certainly not their actually most superlative dream. No, I don't see that.
While we're speaking about ancestors, and you, of course, describe yourself as the mother that you are, whether it's the child that came out of your vagina or the mothering that you do in general. And that's, the basis of this conversation, because we're in a really interesting space this generation, especially of parents, where we're kind of like stuck in the old ways and we want to take some of that with us, but a lot of that didn't work. And then there are all these new ways of parenting, whether you call it gentle parenting or intentional parenting or whatever it is. And I think sometimes it becomes, because we're trying to kind of figure out a new blueprint and a different way to do things. We're trying to raise our children a lot different than maybe some of our parents did. And it's imperfect. It needs a lot of work because we're trying to figure some shit out and it's messy. So I wanted to start with, what would you say are top 3 foundational principles that we should instill in our children? Just like a basic starting point, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really I like this question for a couple of different reasons, because I think that we want to really be clear on what parenting is and its universal kind of understandings, right? And one of the things that majority culture does really well is that it makes these broad sentences and thinks that it is applicable to all, and doesn't necessarily default Black, as Blackness has this possibility of being universal. But I do think that vulnerable populations have so much to offer in terms of universality of ideas. And so the responses that I give, I just want to frame them that they really do come from both studying and understanding the way that kind of majority culture has framed parenting, as well as my own personal and research experience around parenting. And I think that the first thing that we ought to all do is that we must recognize that parenting is a reflection of ourselves, and that we must first attend to things about ourselves if we are going to be modestly successful in parenting. Is that parenting is about the child, yes, but it's far more about us. And one of the reasons I've taken this approach to the way that both I parent and the way I write about parenting is that I begin with the people who parent. Is that parenting is about you. If you want a great kid, you're going to really have to be a great human. And it is not about the kid. You cannot raise a great kid and be a shitty human. It just won't happen. So the first universal thing is attend to yourself and get yourself together. The second thing is to raise the child you have, not the child you wish you had. And that is often difficult for people. People raise children they wish they had. Like, your kid. Your kid is X, Y, or Z, good, bad, or ugly. And that's the kid you raise. That's the key you attend to. People can say it in academic language. I would say attend to the uniqueness of the child that you have, but it is raise the child you have, not the child you wish you had. Don't look at the child outside and be like, I wish you were like X child. Or no, that is it. The third tip is raise a child you like and others will too. If you don't like your kid,
and can we be honest about parents not liking their children? Like, nobody wants to say that or admit that.
Nobody wants to say that, but I'm like, you don't even like your kid.
Like, your father's an asshole. Like, can we talk about it, please? Like,
and the question, I mean, and that's the lie. So a lot of parenting has to do with this hypocrisy. And I'm like, if you don't like your kid, then why should I? Like, why should I? Like, you don't want to spend no time with your kid. You want your kid to come to my classroom, my program, my trip, like my house? No, no. And and a part of that, like a 3A, is that why is your kid like that?
Yeah. What is it like?
Right.
What
is nature and nurture?
Right.
But we know that something went amiss. Why your kid's an
Mhm.
asshole? Something went amiss.
Yeah.
And the question is it because you're not being who you are supposed to be, that you did not attend to,
Yeah.
that what was your role?
Goes back to number 1.
It goes back to number one. And so, for example, caregivers write to me daily, whether it's my DM or my email or responding to the book. And a caregiver wrote to me yesterday about their child being consistently unhappy. And I said,
Mm.
well, are you modeling joy for
Oh,
your child?
Ooh.
Like, your child is consistently melancholy. And what are they seeing in the household? Are
What's their
you?
environment?
Because it is this, like, it's like the principle regarding vegetables. I need you to eat your vegetables even though I don't eat my vegetables.
oh, that's such a
I
thing.
need you to be joyful even though I'm a miserable wretch. How
Mm.
is that how is that appropriate? The do as I say, not as I do parenting style is is a thing of the past.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
model is so outdated. It just doesn't.
It
They're too
doesn't work.
involved. They're looking at you like, that's not
You crazy and
one
you're a
thing not
hypocrite.
like the other. Yeah, like
And we did it too. We did look
Mhm.
at our and they did the same thing. They looked at their
Yeah.
caregivers as that they were crazy. They were like, "Yo, you do the craziest thing, and then you want me to do the right thing." Like, we all did it. So, like, when I think about my mother as a single mom raising 4 kids, and my mother desired all of these things for me. The great thing is I have been this kind of brazen, in Jamaica, they say a feisty. I've been feisty my whole life, right? And as soon as words were at my avail, I used them frequently.
That
Um,
part. And my mother hated it. She had to beat it out of me because
right, and also my mother says that I'm consequence driven, so you can't beat me into submission.
nope.
I've already calculated that at some point you're going to get tired of hitting me. That's not a thing, right?
You
So,
are
like,
like me. Oh my God. My mother gave me 100 licks one time and I counted them because I was so angry. I was like, you will not break me. I am not a horse. And so I just stood there with my hand out and she was giving her best. And I just stood there and I went somewhere else in my head and I was like, oh, she won't win. Not today. She won't.
oh yeah, they're like, you can't punish me into submission. Like,
Nope.
so my mother gave up, my grandmother, my aunties, they gave up on it really early. They're like,
This ain't it.
something wrong with her. Something wrong with her.
This one different.
so, so a part of it is you're gonna have to explain to me.
Talk to
You're gonna
me.
have to explain to me what the deal is. Now, by the time I was a teenager, my mother was very good at explaining that because she was like, clearly something wrong with you. So let me explain to you why I am asking you to do those things. And I'm very reasonable. This is a thing that you will
Mhm.
hear. Like, I am a person, you can reason with me. I
yeah,
can agree to
same.
irrational things. Um, and that's okay. Like, you're like, I need you to do this simply because I don't want to do it. And I need somebody to do it. Like,
And you're up,
I'm
slugger.
always
I
the
get
voice,
that. Just tell me. Yeah, I'm the same way. I get that.
Yeah.
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
Talk to
so
me.
once my mother figured that out, she was like, okay, so we good. We just gonna move.
We
So
gonna
I
work
think,
well
like,
now. I know what to do.
I know what to do. So I think caregivers need to, just to kind of punctuate for those who is that I think that caregivers need to model for their children. I
Mhm.
think that they should raise the child that they have, not the child they wish they had, and
Yeah.
they should raise children that they like and others will too.
Whew.
So
Listen,
those are my top 3.
we can mic drop right there, but we're gonna keep this conversation going, especially on that number 2, raising the child you have.
Yeah.
Because when you pay attention to the child that you have, you can identify their unique needs and then you can solve for those.
Yes.
Like I too, when I first started out, because all I knew was to be like I mean, I got a lot of whoopings growing up. So that's all I knew. So I tried to model that behavior with my daughter. And I looked at her one day and I was like, you are just like me. And then I was like, well, what did I need when I was her age? Was it more whoopings? No. I needed somebody to talk to me. And then through talking to her, having those conversations, it's now opened up a whole new level because she's now 12. And nowadays, I love this age. Like, oh my God, I am entering into the best part for me.
Well,
Baby,
you're about to.
Could have had a V8. I don't like babies. But baby, these right here, this age, I told Danny she could send her child to me when she get, a teenager. I love teenagers. They're just some of the dopest humans on the face of the planet for me. The thing is also now with children, they're growing up with a lot more access. So there are conversations and situations and things that they're experiencing around all the things from self-image to drugs to sex to deciding their personal identity. So the notion that you can just shield them from it all because I want to keep them in this cocoon, it can be a little problematic, but that's just my personal opinion. But you want to shield them without making them super naive, because then you make them shark bait in a world. You make them shark bait and you cut them and then put them into the water.
With the blood bleeding.
Blood coming. With the jaws sound. You need to insert the jaws sound.
Exactly. So what do you believe is like a really good balance? Because now I'm super open with my daughter.
Yeah.
She was with me and saw abuse from my ex-husband very early. Like she stepped in between us when he was about to punch me. So my daughter saw a whole lot very early. So I have had to be extremely open with her. So we talk about everything. I mean, the things I talk about with my girlfriend are the things that I also talk about with my daughter, because she has had more access to things. But what do you believe is a good balance? Because some parents are like, she knows too much.
Well, I think balance is forever changing. Like, I don't think that there's any place that you feel like, there are these moments where you feel like, oh, I got this dance, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other moments where you're like, too little, too much, whatever.
Yeah.
So again, for me, a part of it is this dance, and I believe in this dance. Because social media, and my child has been, because of her public persona, has been on social media fairly early, and we monitored a lot of that, and I talk about that in the book.
Yeah.
I do think that children demand honesty, and I think age appropriate honesty. So the things. So for example, my daughter will ask me questions now at 17, and she asked me the same questions at 10, and she got some answer, right? But she didn't get the full detail. Now, admittedly, at 17, she's getting maybe about 85% of it. I figure I'm gonna wait until 21 to really get fully into it. But I do think that there are these variations. So like she asked about money. So our financial status when she was 10 is different from our financial status at 17. So things that I was worried about, like, we are the first ones out the gate out of deep poverty. So we were still really worried and concerned. I didn't need her to worry. So I believe in establishing foundational things so that children have security and feel safe. So letting her know on the months that we had difficulty making ends meet would have disrupted her. And so she might have seen me at moments where I look concerned, and she says, well, what's the matter? And I will say, oh, I just have some stuff on my mind. Right. But the other day, as I did an IRS audit, right. And she asked me what was on my mind. I say stuff like, we have this IRS audit because of our bad behavior with our taxes when we were younger, right? So we have since cleaned up, but our past came back to roost. And so we have to attend to that. But I would not have said that because when she was 10, because I was so worried. My thing that I say to caregivers is, a part of the conversation with your child about matters is that know that you have an answer. Know that you have a way of resolving it within yourself before you start. You should not be doing deep levels of processing with your children, because it can disrupt them and make them feel unsafe and insecure. Yeah. So if I'm talking to my child about sex, I already have a perspective on sex, both same sex as well as heterosexual sex. Like I know what I think. So when I'm talking to her, I am not deeply processing. And also, if I'm uncertain when I'm talking to her about information or perspective, I was like, I hadn't even thought about it that way. Because, for example, my daughter, because she's a part of this generation, talk a lot about like transgendered folks and the fact that people don't understand that once a person has transitioned to their new gender, then they can be both gay or straight. Is that people still hold them back to their own identities. I had never thought about that. So as she's talking to me, I'm like, I'd never thought about that before. That's really new understanding. And if you could say to me more. But I think it's really, for me, you will hear me always go back to this kind of foundational things that caregivers need to do. Establish security and trust between you and the child. And that means presenting your first humanity, which is like, I don't know. I am sorry I thought that. I'm still thinking about it. This is what I know to be true. This is the information that I know that is factual, but this is how I feel about it. Like I always tell my daughter, I was like, look, sis, like you grew up with all of these understandings. I'm an old bigot. Like I'm an old bigot. Like I intellectually know a bunch of stuff, but I still don't really like a bunch of stuff, right? Like, and I also say stuff to her like, I remember being homophobic. Like, sis, like you now know your mommy, la 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 la, right? And you see me as evolved, but sis, I'm an old bigot. And I'm still trying to work through things.
Yeah.
The only thing that I feel like I have not been, I really do believe that young people have a voice and opinion that needs to be valued. I've always felt that.
Yeah.
But gayness, moneyness, whiteness, like all the stuff that she has clarity on,
Yeah.
I've come to this. Okay. And I was like,
Still coming to it.
You grew to it. You grew to this.
I'm new to it. So like you feel like she feels self-assured, right? And the girls at grassroots, like they feel self-assured because like with technology, I was like, sis, I had a phone. Okay. Like I had a phone. I'm from the phone era.
No screen, a phone with no screens on it.
I was like, you really fail to understand that like I'm an old bigot. I am still working my way through shit that you have already resolved. So take it easy.
Above. Like,
right?
You're ahead of the curve.
I was like, so balance for me looks like stepping, misstepping, learning, growing. And there are certain things that I think caregivers should not let their children have access to. I'm really clear on that.
Absolutely.
One is that you should not have access to, caregivers should guard against having people around their children or on the internet who they follow that are extremely consumeristic and pessimistic. Two kinds of people, right? Like if you are all money, get paid, mogul in the making, da 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 in the bag, don't have your kid around those people. You might think of them as benign, but they're a problem. Consumerism, especially capitalism, hyper-capitalism, is going to destroy your child because what it does is that it devalues learning, it devalues connection, and it's self-centering. Yeah. This is not good for children. And it is particularly not good for Black children who want to be in community and you want to be healthy. So consumeristic people get the L, right? The second thing are pessimists. People who cannot see beyond this moment, who are consistently belaboring, and I'm so tired, I'm so sick and tired, even if they're tired of oppression and racism, whatever, you are a grumpy butt. Do not have your children around these people virtually or in person. Yeah. So I definitely think balance requires certain very specific values you have to decide that you're not going to take in. Now, I am far more lenient about all matters related to sex. Probably not good though, but it is the way I am. I do understand that young people more and more, pornography is problematic on a whole bunch of different levels. And I know that at about 12, that kids are really, really curious about pornography because so much of America is sex and violence. Wow. And I do think that I know of my own engagement, my own work, that kids do pull up pornography. And I think that requires a conversation. I think people who are largely Christian or people who are deep in orthodoxy have a difficult time talking about sex of all sorts, masturbation and on.
Mhm.
And I do think a balance is talking to children about, I do think your entree should always be health. And then I think you should start with masturbation before talking about any forms of other sex. And that I know that that is difficult for caregivers. Violence, I think I am very, very clear that violence should be fantastical in terms of exposure to children, rather than the kind of violence that you see. So your superhero Marvel movies are appropriate for children up to 17, but I don't think more violent movies that replicate or shows real life are appropriate. Because again, I think it feeds a kind of pessimism and a hyperrealism in children's lives that stunts their understanding and
Yeah.
stunts their imagination. And I don't think children should be overly exposed to that. And I do believe in limiting, just to kind of close it out, I believe in limiting access to commercials up until children are 10, that children should largely watch shows that do not have any commercials. Again, that is because I believe capitalism is an extreme danger for children, and commercials invite a kind of hedonism that we should
Mm.
should really rally against.
Yeah. Wow. I'm like, you see me, I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm like, I'm a new parent. So I'm like, there's just so much you're trying to figure out as to the approach you want to take. And something I wanted to comment on when it comes to that sharing with your child. And Alicia, honestly, watching you do it, it's not something I'm 100% comfortable with, just based on my own kind of upbringing and just, and I know it's something you're always trying to figure out navigating too, Lisa. That's why I just love how transparent you are about you trying to figure parenting out. Cause I just think a lot of people don't do that. And they always just want to seem like everything's fine. But Alicia's always like, hey, I tried this and that didn't work. I'm trying this now. I'm going to see if it happens. This experiment is it's an experiment. You know?
It's lovely.
And
Thank you.
I wanted some clarity on the oversharing or the sharing with your child, because I read in some book about sometimes the dangers of kind of making your child too aware of things where they feel they now have to protect you or they have to
Mhm.
shield you, or now like the parent, I think it's like I think the technical term is like the parent child reversal.
Yeah.
Um,
So so there's a lot of science about that. So children love, if they're attached to you, right? There's all the early attachment theories. If they're attached to you, they love you and they want you to be safe like you want them to be safe.
Yeah.
Things like the experience that Alicia's had regarding violence disrupts that,
Yeah,
right? Because
absolutely.
it's not just about emotional safety, it's about physical safety, that
Right.
children have to know kind of warning signs.
Yeah.
And all children should know this, right? Regardless of whether or not they identify as girl or boy, is that the ever present nature of how to stay physically safe and how to stay
Mhm.
emotionally safe. I lay this out in the book, is that we have to always talk to our children about identifying areas of emotional safety and dangers
yeah.
related to that, and physical safety. But I do think that what people talk about in oversharing, I mean in terms of issues of security, right?
Mm,
Is
okay.
that if a child feels like I can predict what is happening next, I know that my mother is gonna, or my father or my auntie is gonna pick me up at school. And I trust that because they show up when they say they're gonna show up. They
Yeah.
do that. I expect to have dinner. I know that there's gonna be dinner. Even if it's not at 5 o'clock, it's at 6 o'clock, it's at 7 o'clock. It's really important to establish that. What
Mm,
happens when you share information with them is, if you share information that makes them feel like I have no idea what's gonna happen next,
Oh,
oh,
right?
okay.
And that is where children begin to feel unsettled, right? Like, I have the unpredictable nature of it is like, I don't know if my mom is gonna be all right tomorrow. I don't know if my brother is going to get removed from the house. I don't know if we're gonna have food to eat. I don't know if the car is gonna break down. Like that, then much like our own physical body, children start to calculate ways that they can develop a safety. Like, what can I do then to assure that my mother is all right, my brother is okay, that they try to figure out their part. Like, maybe if I don't eat, maybe if I just don't say anything, maybe if I, if I just do my homework in advance, maybe if
Wow.
I decide that, like, they are trying to do their part too. And
Yeah.
that is where the issue comes in. So if you need to share with your child that this happens, like, look, if you see this happen, stay away from that. And they feel like they can predict and they can feel secure that I personally, as well as the science, this is not a problem. But if you create an environment where children's lives feel unpredictable,
Wow. Oof.
then their responses are going to be how to create predictable conditions, how to create safe conditions for
Yeah.
themselves and those that they care about. And you see that, right? They're like, look, my mother's got no money, so really I got to sell these drugs, or like, I can't, I can't cause any problems for my mother, so she leaves work and come to school. So even if the teacher is being rude to me, I just have to suck it up. I can't tell anybody, because how is she going to come down here? If she has to come down here or he has to come down here, that could create a problem for her at work.
I don't think people know that they're processing on such a deep level and that they even think like that.
Yeah. This is how, when you talk to children, you see how they're trying to figure out, like you're trying to figure out how to make things work.
Yeah.
Right. And if they're in loving spaces, they're trying to figure out their part. And I think caregivers miss that. So you'll see sometimes, so like even my own daughter, she will, in 2020, at the top of 2020, we had all of these different challenges. And she was like, well, I didn't want to tell you because I know that you've been busy working on your book. Right? Like she's trying to be a loving daughter. So she was willing to suffer to be a loving daughter.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought that she was okay because she hasn't said anything. But her silence was a private suffering because she's trying to be as supportive of me as I've been of her. And she didn't think I had the capacity to both work on my book and attend to her emotionally. And how many of us do that? We do that to all the people we love. We're like, girl, I didn't want to tell you my problems. I know you're already going through something.
Yeah.
And we don't understand that it is in sharing that we actually create deeper connections and deeper forms of security. We miss that. And so in everything that you will hear me do, I will always come back to the idea is that it's the connecting that strengthens and heals us. That anything that fosters space in a way that is too individualistic, that feeds into systems of hyper individualism, are just not in our favor for our health and well-being, which is why you will always hear me come back to how problematic capitalism is, because it relies on hyper-individualism. This is why notions of whiteness are so problematic, because it relies on hyper-individualism, and hyper-individualism is really harmful for all people. And they're particularly harmful for people of African descent and people from vulnerable populations.
Oh, wait, can we hold on? Because this is like perfect for the next question. Alicia, we talk about this all the time, especially just because of your experience with your daughter and her having to be in white spaces, in order to kind of progress in a certain way. And I always say, like, a lot of the mainstream advice on parenting comes from white parents and white educators and white authorities in that space, who are raising children with just a different experience. It's just their worldview, their experience in the world, how they show up in the world is just different. And I sometimes worry that as Black people, we're taking on or listening to or trying to apply certain things that in theory, they sound great. Like, it sounds really good. But I'm not really sure if it is as applicable as we think it is. And I'm always, like I said, I'm a new mother, and I'm just in this space where I'm just trying to figure out what I want my approach to be. Like, I'm thinking about that now. So I was just curious as to how do we incorporate maybe some of the terms like gentle parenting, intentional parenting techniques that I think can be really great, but while also parenting our Black children for a world that may not be as gentle or may not be as intentional towards our children?
Oh, I love this question. I mean, this is also the focus of so I'm going to be doing 4 in-person book talks, Newark, Los Angeles, Boston, and DC. And I'm also coming to Atlanta at Spelman. And so a part of, and all I'll be talking about primarily is raising Black kids in white spaces. So I'll give you some thoughts on that matter. So Elijah Anderson has a book out right now. It's called Black in White Spaces. Elijah Anderson is a sociologist at Yale. He was at the University of Pennsylvania for so many years. I want to distinguish for anybody who's listening, white people from white spaces. That's probably really important as I set my comments. So whiteness in and of itself requires some white people, but doesn't have to be all white. That whiteness, like capitalism, like many of these things, are really about what we value. That we can value white people without them being around. We can value individualism, capitalism, solo behavior, mogul in the making, hustle culture without white people. And so this, I think, is really what we're fighting against. We are fighting against things that would promote unhealthy behaviors, practices, and values. And people who are white find real value in that. Hyper competitiveness, money as the center of things, individualism. But it's not all people who are white. They're just a part of it. And there are lots of Black people, many of them we have as our public persona, especially our entertainers and athletes, who also value similar things. And these ideas are troublesome and problematic for Black healthy people, and particularly for Black children. And so we have to kind of know and set the stage for that. If you are Black and middle class and you don't live in Atlanta or in parts of Maryland, you are going to be in a largely white space, right? Like, and because it's going to be safer, you're going to have the kind of housing spaces that you want. You're going to have access to educational opportunities and right? Like there's going to be a lot of benefits to white people and white spaces that Black people deserve. We deserve great streets and neighborhoods with sidewalks.
And a Whole Foods. You know what I'm saying?
Well, like maybe a Trader Joe's, right? So
just good food,
healthy option, right? Food that isn't just poison. But when we do that, we do need, so to use that word from the previous question, we do need a balance in effect.
Yes.
Right? Black children need Black people. I just want to say that again. Black children need Black people. Black children need healthy Black people, more specifically. And that means that even if they learn from and live in neighborhoods that are white, they need a Black community within that space.
They need a safe space. I agree.
They need a safe, healthy space to be healthy Black children. And they need to have a strong racial identity if they live in the US.
Yes.
Every bit of research, social science, psychological research, wherever you go, Black children and all children thrive if they have a strong early racial identification, because it removes them again from this individualistic model. People who are hyper capitalistic, hyper individual are unhealthy.
I agree.
Are extremely unhealthy. They may look thin, they may have a lot of money, they may look that, but they head, right? Like they are not okay. And so Black children need to know this. All children need to recognize that their health and well-being is not just about them. Individual health is a myth. Community and public health is the reality. Your health is shaped by the people around you, the streets that you walked on, your neighborhood, the cars in your neighborhood, everything else.
That part.
And it's therefore shaped by the history of racial stressors, the economic condition. We can start very early by telling kids this.
Yes.
And so if you are a parent, any kind of parent, white folks are out there, and because white is the default in America, they don't have to say white parenting. They just say parenting.
Yeah. And I'm just like, this doesn't seem like it applies. I don't know.
But it applies to them as well. Is that
Yeah.
white parenting and Black parenting and all other forms of parenting demands that we tell our children that their lives are structural, that the things around them are shaping their lives.
Yeah.
The people and the structures. So the white advice that we have been getting, the white parenting literature, right, has been saying a bunch of things that we need to have gentle parenting. But the romantic glee that whites get to have in the United States is not a romantic glee that Black people get to have. The reason why is because America is 72% white.
Yeah.
Black kids need to know that, and white kids need to know that. White kids don't know that neither. They don't, right? They don't know that America is so white. Racial segregation got people all the way crazy, and they think that America is not white. That's why they got stupid terms like reverse racism. America is white. The culture is white. The culture is individualistic and capitalistic. White kids need to understand that. Black kids need to understand that. That's one of the core things missing from the white parenting literature. Black kids, once they understand that America is white, then they will understand where the power sources of all the things that's happening to them comes from. And we need to tell our children this. This colorblind parenting that white folks use, we cannot use.
No.
Nobody can use. White parents are in the wrong to do colorblind parenting, and we in the more wrong, we wronger, right? If we do the same thing with our children.
It makes them unsafe.
We think it makes them safe, and it actually puts them at tremendous social and emotional risk.
Yes. Yeah. Because they don't understand what's coming, and all of a sudden they get punched in the face, and they're like, wait, we're equal. All things are equal. We're all humans. And it's like, yes. And there's
no.
But see, that goes back to the very sentence I said before, is that children, when they feel safe, right, they will do a set of things and they will seek safety. So when racism hits a Black or brown child or any vulnerable child, they're seeking to understand. And what they will default to understand is that there's something about me that I should change. My hair, my body, my personality. And they will not understand that it is the structure.
Yeah. And once they start changing that, you lose the essence or the best of them, because they're now trying to be a method actor every day, which is why I took my daughter primarily out of the private schools that she was in. And I'm like, no, let me see if I can get you around still a good school, but I need you to be around more diverse spaces, because when you tell me you don't like your skin color, you don't like your hair, you don't, ma'am, we getting into dangerous waters, because now you're starting to hate who you are. I cannot change your hair without chemicals, and I'm not doing chemicals. I can't change your skin, again, without chemicals, and I'm not putting chemicals to change your skin. Like, we ain't doing that. But so I got to change your environment.
But we can think about white kids. So if you're a white kid who loves hip hop, you may also hate your hair. You may also hate your skin. True. You may not understand, because the majority of the cultural things that we take in America are Black things.
Interesting.
Right? So white kids are also on the other end, not understanding as well. This is why being rooted in your racial identity in the US is so important. So we assume that the challenges that Black kids are experiencing, that white kids are not going through it as well, because they too do not have an understanding of the structure.
And that's why there's so much appropriation from that end. Yeah.
And that's why their joyful parenting, their kind of romantic parenting that they do is as problematic. But we don't talk about it, because white parenting literature, white parenting advice are all self-centering. They're not communal. So what Black caregivers can do, and what Black parenting literature needs to do, is to be able to help white folks understand that they're trying to do the same thing we're trying to do. We're all trying to protect and raise healthy children.
Right.
right? But the
Absolutely.
ignorance that is being fostered in white parenting practices harms their children and our children,
Yeah.
So it
right?
harms both. So this is not just a one benefit. This
No.
is a universal communal bit. Like, and that's the thing too that I pains me so much about the effects of the slave trade is African culture. Even when you go back to Africa now, and before the pandemic, I literally would visit Africa 2-3 times a year. It is so communal. It is literally, it's not one for, it's communal. Everything is done in community. If one is without, then the other gives a little so that the other isn't completely without. Like, it's communal. But here in the States, it's me, mine, and no more. And it's like, what you don't understand, which is why I had started a foster care program years ago, is if you allow this one to sit without, they are going to grow resentment and hatred for the ones that have, and then they are going to come and take from you the very thing that you were withholding from them because it's you, yours, and no more. Then you have an entire group of people who develop that resentment and that hatred towards you, and they're on that same really low vibrational wavelength, and then they're going to get together with all that low vibration, and they're going to come and disrupt whatever it is that you think you didn't
All,
create it over there. They
mhm.
come
Well, I mean,
disrupting shit.
Yeah, and people will even use terms like, oh, Black people are like crabs in a bucket, but crabs don't belong in a bucket. So why don't we talk about the environment? Crabs aren't supposed to be there.
They're not.
I
They're in
mean,
the wrong place.
so a part of it's, I think the piece that I would add to that is that the people who are describing the crabs in the bucket, the people who are deemed as disruptive have less power. And if white kids, white parents, and Black kids, and brown kids, and other vulnerable populations do not understand that white folks, because this is a white country, have the power, they're not simply going to describe the people in the bucket. They have the power to close that bucket and suffocate all the crabs. They have
Mm,
the power to codify in rules and law and in a carnal state that those people are disruptive and are not worthy of life. This is very, very important. It is not just philosophical, it has
yeah.
practical implications.
Yes.
So when Black kids, particularly since we're talking about Black kids, when Black kids don't know this, we're harming them with
Yep.
ignorance. So
Ooh.
colorblind parenting that white parents use and many Black parents are using is harmful in practical ways, because I think, when I talk about these issues, people think I'm being philosophical, and yes, I do think philosophy is important, right? But the practical implications of these parental practices are important. The book that I wrote is called Parent Like It Matters, because it matters. Like, it has real implications for social political behavior. If you want to galvanize and move the power structure of the Black community, you're gonna have to begin with the way you parent, because Black folks need to see humanity in other Black folks in order to be in community, in order to galvanize the vote, in order to be able to push forward an agenda. This is not like just some theory like, oh, it'd be nice if we got along as brothers and sisters. Okay, it would be nice
Sounded
if we
good.
got along as brothers and sisters, but it also would be nice if we were able to galvanize and use our combined economic, social, and political power to advance changes in the society, like canceling student debt, like reducing the wage gap, like pushing forward reparations, like being able to have community colleges and state colleges be free. Like these things, we need to raise our children in a particular way. White parents need to do it because we need white allies in a country that's white.
Yes.
Black parents and other groups need to do that because we need to move in a society that has a structural framework that's healthy so we can have healthy people.
Yes.
We are the least healthy on all measures of well-being of
Yep.
all developed countries.
Every measure.
And if we continue on this chart, white romantic and gleeful parenting practices will not sustain us. But harsh and overly carnal Black parenting will not sustain us either.
Can't do
Right.
that one either. You
So
can't.
It's
So
from one
I
extreme to the next.
It's one extreme, but I just want to make sure that I answer the question that I started with. I think that the practices, one of the things that I very much enjoy about what white romantic life has to offer, in forms of gentle parenting, talking to your kids, helicopter parenting, all the rest of these things, is that white folks have the luxury of being able to think about humanity more than we do. We still, because of the power structure, have to think a lot about survivalship. And white folks do not have to do that. And so, in
And
terms of
emotional
what white
labor.
folks have to bring to the table that we can learn from, is that we can really learn from the way in which their romantic power structure has afforded them the ideas of being able to be philosophical and kind and sweet in their parenting in ways that have been stripped from us, not because of some cultural defect, but because of the historical insult that is the enslavement of African people across the globe and the continued kind of structural raping of our economic, social, and political resources.
Okay. 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 Woo. I'm digesting that. Wow. Wow.
Processing for sure.
Wow.
It's,
Oof.
man. Okay. Let
Oof.
me
That
come
is,
back in.
yeah.
I gotta bring myself back because I had plugged so deeply into what you're saying. And the
Yeah.
thing of it is this isn't just a feeling, like this is fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
It's
fact. And
undeniable.
yeah, and in the midst of all of this, you're also still trying to heal yourself.
Yeah.
I
I
think that's
mean,
the biggest thing. You're trying to heal yourself still.
but it's very difficult. So this is why we have to think of healing as a process. It is
Yeah.
difficult. The daily assaults, micro and macro assaults that Black people experience as they're trying to give life and breathe energy and joy into their children is a structural issue.
Yeah.
It is really important that we take a lot of these things that we think are personal defects, cultural mishaps, and really put them in their proper frame. If
Yeah.
I am experiencing wage inequality and racial stressors at work, we know that the difficulty all caregivers feel at work, they take out at their children.
Yeah.
We know that. The science, every bit of science tells us this. So imagine the daily assaults that Black people experience in the workplace, and they have to go home and then be loving, optimistic, communal,
How,
teachers and
way.
learners, that we are at a structural deficit, right? And this, I think, is that people have cast our parenting in a light that suggests that it is about that parenting is somehow cultural. Parenting is framed by structural conditions. So it is difficult to heal when we have difficulty in getting financial support for medical help, physical as well as mental health. We don't have the insurance. White folks may be more in therapy, but not simply because they've somehow tapped into an evolution that is necessary, but they can pay for it on average.
It's just that simple.
And then you
Right?
get better quality too, because like even in our criminal justice system, if you can't afford it, yes, you get a lawyer appointed to you. However, there is a huge difference in your level of specialty from a free lawyer versus one that you pay for. Same thing with mental health services. There is a difference. No disrespect to those who have sat through and got their, degrees and they are a therapist and everything else. There's a difference between the therapist that you pay for and the therapist that's free through like your Medicaid, Medicare systems.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
but
it's
we don't frame it as an economic issue, an issue of racial, right, and economic inequality. This is, to me, it is the frame, right? We don't think about the fact that white wealth affords a set of resources that makes and appears to have whites as more evolved humans than Black folk, right? Like it is the power, it is the resource, right? So when we see that a white parent can then sit for an hour and talk to their child about their feelings, can make sure that they get to school, can lay out their clothing, can sing and dance with them, right? We don't frame that as look at the power of galvanizing white economic resources so that it's distributed in a way that leads to this. We don't frame it that way.
Wow.
We send memos like, Black parents are just not that engaged in their children's education and their social activities.
Wow.
The reframing gives us a different way of thinking about our own people,
Yeah.
and better understanding economic inequality.
Yeah.
That reframe, that context, this is why I keep coming back. I'm a sociologist after all, is that these are the structural understandings that kids need. Because they will say, like, oh, so and so's mom was here to pick her up after school, and I have to be in after school care. You know why? Because America's racist. America's racist. And that is the reason why so and so's mom can do that, because so and so's mom is likely partnered with somebody who has greater economic resources, or so and so's dad is likely partnered with somebody who has more economic resources. And the insult of the enslavement of African people and the way the society continues to structures means that I'm a sundowner mom, right? That means I can come and get you at sundown. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm off of work then.
Because the structure of the society has punished me and others like me. It won't be the case for every single person, but this is a structural issue.
In general, yeah.
And so when we have time, we have to think about galvanizing. But that's very difficult to do if we're in white spaces where other Black caregivers value that way of being, right? And do not frame it. I mean, we don't talk about it enough that, yes, all three of us here, we seem to have a shared philosophy on the importance of communal living and what it means to, but we have hella Black people. Again, white supremacy doesn't need white people, right?
No.
So we have hella Black people who be like, yeah, girl, yeah, that's cute for you, but really, I gotta get me in mind.
Yeah, like some of my friends didn't understand when my ex-husband had a daughter, a second daughter who was not mine. I became really good friends with the mother of that daughter because I told her, I was like, I know who the father of your child is, and you're going to need some support. I am going to be a support to you because I know you're going to need it. So I take her daughter for the summer sometimes. She takes mine. We'll switch off on holidays. If I need relief, she'll take my daughter so that I can have mental relief. I'm like, this is what you're going to need. And some of my friends are like, something's really wrong with you. And I'm like, no, you don't understand community. These two girls are sisters. Regardless of what the situation was, they are sisters and they are going to need each other because I would not be alive were it not for my sister.
Yeah.
There is a level of support that you need when you are going through an experience that is not easy. And it's not about the mistakes you made or the bad choices or the decisions that you made. The outcome is this human who A, did not ask to be here, and who B, we need to ensure is put in a position so that she feels like she can still win. So
Yeah.
it requires us to be in community. And I love her like I love my own. They are sisters.
Yeah.
There has to be community. You cannot just, oh, well, I'm mad and I don't like it. Da, da, da. Calm down. Go sit on somebody's couch. We're gonna work it out. We're gonna figure it through. But these are tiny humans who literally have the power to change generational type things if we can just, and I know this will sound a little gentle parenting, but love them enough so that they can figure out who they are and then they can move in the world in power, not from a place of not from a deficit, because they're already, unfortunately, starting in a position that might not lend to power or that does not lend to power.
Yeah,
No,
and
no,
I wanted to kind of circle back to you, just if since we're talking about community still, just to circle back to you talking about how it impacts us all, whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're in between. Sometimes everybody seems so individualistic and they're only thinking about themselves, not realizing the ripple effect. And one of those ripple effects is the drastic rise in school shootings. I don't think we can talk about parenting without talking about school
no,
shootings
we
and the number
cannot.
of school
We
shootings.
cannot.
Um,
Um,
and it's obviously it's isolated to one race for the most part, that these children, for whatever reason, feel like they can walk into a space and completely shift it and make these awful changes. And from some research that I've done and Alicia's done and we've just done, a lot of the research points to children kind of experiencing more trauma than adversity. They find it difficult to cope with feelings of shame, rejection. Obviously, there's some kind of entitlement in there somewhere. And it kind of, I feel like nobody's really asking enough questions around that. I mean, for whatever reason, little Timmy just has mental issues, but there's just not much more to it than that. And it bothers me because it's like, when you talk about gang violence within Black communities, there's this idea that that's just how they are, and that's just what it is, and what else can you expect? And then when Timmy walks into the school and shoots up and kills 10 people for what appears to be no apparent reason, and all of a sudden he's so humanized. And it's because this happened and his dad died, and oh, this happened to him. And there's this deep understanding, as to why this could have possibly happened. So, I wanted to just ask some questions around, like, how can we create this environment for children to kind of thrive using adversity as a tool to build character and coping mechanisms? Like, how can we navigate that? Whether you're Black, white, or, like I said, in between.
so I do think, I mean, I just want to restate because you said it so kindly. And so I will say it quite differently, I think. Is that we do not ask, what is it about white kids, particularly white boys, that make them so prone to mass violence?
Oof.
We don't.
Yeah, that was not as kind as I said.
I think I think that's the real question. What is happening with white boys such that they engage in such mass violence? And the violence that white boys perpetuate is different from the violence that Black boys perpetuate. So we know it's
Ooh.
18 through 24 for Black boys outside of school. And we know that it is 15 through 20 for white boys in school. What is happening? What are the similarities and what are the differences? And what are the role of caregivers in these distinctions? The evidence seems to be clear, even though it's not framed as parenting, is that there's something happening in households that is shaping both of these outcomes. And Black boys are framed as the source of their trauma seems to be the Black mama. People say their mother doesn't have enough governance over them, and that's why they're allowed to be truant, to buy guns.
And that's in the absence of the Black father as well.
Yes, right? But given that the Black father is so beautifully incarcerated at mass rates, then the people who are left to take care of these Black boys are the Black mamas. So she's obviously failed them, and therefore they are allowed to run amiss. That is the kind of reductionist explanation. For white boys, the explanation is that they suffer some deep personal trauma, likely attached to mental health deficit, often not symptomology, but considered something psychiatric, that leads them. So there are no adults to be blamed for their issue. Right? So in many instances, usually what happens is that we don't attach Black children to community, except if there are somehow in some kind of deviant behavior. Yeah. And we allow, we talk about them as if they are just individual human beings. So, but in the case of violence, we attach and have a source to blame, and that's their Black mamas.
Yeah.
And Um, I think that this is, for me, it's a pretty standard American thing, is that we try to find explanations for deviant white behaviors that will allow us to be able to remediate white folks and
Mm.
white ways of misbehaving. So if we say that the white boys are suffering from psychiatric disorder, then we can find institutional responses. We can throw money at the problem and we can help them. And because we need a way to help them. If white boys are hurting, then we need a national strategy to help white
Yeah.
boys. And that national strategy is really clear. The fact that some Black kids may get help is cool, but they're not the focus, right? And I think that all of these issues do have to do with parenting. I do think that the racists are onto something when they say that there's something happening in Black households that contribute to why Black boys are on the streets. I just disagree with the something, but I do think they're onto something. I do also think that there is something very specific happening with white boys that in their households that is contributing to their violence, their mass violence.
Yeah.
And I think it's roughly the same thing. I think it is racism. I think it is racial structures and racist structures are making it very difficult for Black families to stay cohesive and healthy, and for Black communities to stay cohesive and healthy. The good of racists don't understand that. They don't know what that means or looks like. If you do, in fact, replete, take away, destroy, disrupt a large segment of the Black population by putting them and warehousing them in prison, then you're going to have a community problem. If you then leave the other half, Black mamas, to work, to not be able to take care of themselves, to live in neighborhoods without recreational spaces or trees, neighborhoods that are filled with noise, school systems that are inept, then they're going to have difficulty being able to be the best parent that they can be. Right?
Because they're busy.
They are singularly busy.
They're busy.
If nothing else, it's not even just busy. Like, there's going to be a host of things. You underpay women. You underpay Black women.
The most. We get paid the least.
Right? So
67
you
cents to
underpay
$1.
poor housing, poor health,
no food,
bad streets, etc. Their children are going to feel the ramifications, and their children are going to respond in a way that the society is violent already. One of the many ways is this response. White caregivers don't have that as the reason. They simply do not. Their men and father figures are not incarcerated at the same rate. So what's happening in your household, ma'am, sir? Right? Something else is happening. Something else is happening that is also about racist structures. Racist structures have suggested to you that you don't have to do as much because your kid's going to be all right.
There's
you don't have to, right? So because Black families are at a deficit, there is this kind of forced intentionality. Like, I need to make sure that you're doing all right in school, that you're this, you're that, da, 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 da. There's this thing. But white families don't have that imperative. They don't feel the daily dangers that their kids are going to go awry. That is not something that they have to contend with at the rate. And so we should really ask what is happening in white households that is leading to this. And I would say the racist structures that organize white households around what parenting should look like, what is the role of men and boys, and the patriarchy that is ever present is a contributing factor. So until we decide as social scientists, myself included, that we're going to study and specifically understand structures that shape white boy parenting and socialization, we're going to be missing a piece of it. But I think both kinds of households, both kinds of violence, internal to school and in and around schools, are largely due to the racist infrastructure that organizes the society.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oof.
Listen, there is there is so much more that we want to get into, but this conversation is so important because it taps into not just the symptom but the problem. And too many times in America, we keep trying to solve and provide solutions for the symptom without actually going to the problem. And so as we're wrapping up, I wanted to talk about this last piece, which is the pressure. And there is a lot of pressure, especially as you are dealing and healing from your own traumas. I've gone on my own journey to figure out self-love so that I too can model the behavior of this is what love looks like. This is the type of choices and decisions you make when you really care about yourself. When you really fuck with you, this is what you do. When you really like you, these are the decisions that you make. I don't care how much you love that other person. When you are your primary, these are the choices that you make.
Yeah.
But being a perfect parent can sometimes be the opposite of that. And so often it leads us to completely ignoring our own like wants and needs. And for the first time in my own personal life, I am becoming super selfish about what Alicia wants and needs. And I'm loving every freaking moment of it. But what are some things like that parents can do to discover, to honor, and then to actually implement those practices that satisfy our needs and desires too?
So this is a perfect question for me. So because my girlfriends all have all kinds of jokes. They have all kinds of jokes, all kinds of jokes. So the first thing, so in the book, I lay out that you should do your ACEs. It's really important that you go online and you look at your adverse childhood experiences. You need to take stock. So I believe in the principle of Sankofa. You
Mm.
have to look back in order to move forward. And the first thing in order to be the kind of caregiver you want to be, and I think all of us really want to usher in, support, coach our children towards health and well-being, is that you must know yourself. And for me, the ACEs evaluation is an online evaluation, and you take it, right? And you have a sense of how many adverse childhood things you experience. Because once you have that, then you can get a better sense of like where you are.
Okay.
And like, am I really all right? Am I really all right? And if I'm not really all right, what do I need to be really all right? And that pausing on yourself is a really great first step. The other thing that I say in the book, which is really important, is that regardless of the age of your child, you must make time at the top of each day for yourself before them. Before them. So many people are like, I'm not a morning person. All right, whatever.
Figure
Um,
it out.
you have to find the silence each day for yourself before you fuck with other people. Okay.
Yes.
Some people call it prayer. I'm with it. Some people call it meditation. Some people call it exercise.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you call it, if you do not center yourself daily,
Yeah.
you will be whack as a human. And then that's likely whack as a parent.
Yeah.
So for me, this is fundamental. The selfishness that you speak of is a selfishness that I embrace. So my husband and my daughter have all kinds of jokes because of my workout situation. Right. And I've been many weight points. Okay. Many. Okay. And it don't matter
Yeah.
because movement keeps me from acting like a white boy in terms of mass violence. And and I have to move. I have to find a meditative activity that allows me to reflect and think, right? I think for a living. Um, in order to be able to move forward and to give to others. People like Vazant says your cup has to have an overflow for you to give. There's all kinds of analogies around this matter. But for me, and what we know is that self-actualized people can give to a lot of things. So you have to be self-actualized. We call it self-care, kind of a whack-ass term that's out there, whatever the case may be. But it is about attending to yourself deeply, not cosmetically. Attending to yourself deeply allows you then to be able to be a reflexive person, and that is really required for parenting. Parenting and selfhood requires consistent reflection.
Yes.
Not rumination. I know how y'all are. Like, you run through your day, you're just like, I probably should have cussed her out. I should have said that. No, that's rumination. I am not talking about rumination. I'm talking about reflection, higher order thinking about, am I being the person that I wish to be? Right? So at Grassroots Community Foundation that I run, we talk about the principle of Ma'at. And these principles are these pledges that you make to yourself every day. And these pledges are essential. So at the end of the day, you can come back to them. So if you say, today, I am going to be truthful in the way that I approach things, at the end of the day, can you say, I have been truthful about the way that I approach things? So that's reflection. Right?
Yeah.
That reflexive activity allows you to be. But notions of perfectionism are really problematic for your own well-being and problematic for the way that you may approach your children. For Black parents, I just want y'all to lean into this portion of it. Black humanity is under attack, in large part because we think we need to be perfect under the white gaze. This is yet another outcome of white supremacy. Perfectionism is not what's required. Humanity is a spectrum, and we should be seeking to be a part of that spectrum. We should not be superhuman because we're not mutants.
Yeah.
We should not be seeking to lean into inhumanity, which is this depravity, the way they talk about violence in our community, poverty, etc. We should be seeking to be a part of this spectrum.
Yes.
Right? And this spectrum is what we want for ourselves so that we can model it for our children. This, to me, is what parenting is about. It is about this daily reflection of moving towards the self that will make us feel exactly where you started this conversation, of attending to our fullest human potential and vibrating at the highest level possible, given what we were born with. Then, and only then, can we move towards the kind of parenting that allows us to usher in, coach, support healthy human beings.
Listen, I don't know if you know it, that entire gave me chill. I've had chills the entire time, but you are now officially, whether you like it, know it, you are officially a friend of mine and a mentor and an
right? All the things. A mother, all the things.
All the things. So go ahead, tell Marley she just got 2 older sisters.
Really She'll like that, because she'll be like, this lady.
We're really kind and awesome humans. So just let her know. Thank you so much for, adopting us into your family.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. I only have one child. She's about to leave the house. I'm gonna get it popping.
Listen, invite me on a trip because I love a good twerk.
Hello.
Yeah.
And a good bubble.
I can't be a Jamaican without bubbling. I never used to be able to be very good at it, but I spent a lot of time perfected it.
I love it. So where can we stay connected? How can we tap in, buy the book? Like, where all the things we want to know.
So the book, this is the book. Parent Like
Parent
It
Like It
Matters,
Matters.
How to Raise Joyful Change-Making Girls. You can get it on Amazon, Target, wherever books are sold, Books A Million, everywhere. You can also find it on my website, those links at www.thedrjanice.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Janice Johnson. And you can also, I run a foundation for women and girls that focus on public health and social justice, Grassroots Community Foundation. And so you can find me there. I am also an associate professor of sociology and criminal justice at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and you can find me there. And I do some other things. Again, I'm Jamaican. I have 10 titles. So I am easy to find on most of the medias. I don't know how to use TikTok, but because my behavior and my dancing is scandalous and really only for dark places and walls, I will not be probably doing a TikTok dance, so it's fine that I'm not on there. My daughter's like, she's just like, Mom, really though. And my husband, whenever he and I go out, he's like, can we just keep both feet on the ground? Because if you're Jamaican, one foot have to come up.
Listen.
So
or it's college in Miami. I know what that life is about.
No, it just really is. Like, I'm like, really though? So
why gotta do all of that?
The respectable Dr. Janice Johnson, keep both feet on the ground and simple Instagram pictures and Facebook pictures and LinkedIn pictures. But you know, you come a party and at dark, you find me in the corner. So that is.
I love it. I love it. We are definitely going to stay connected with you. I cannot wait for this episode to come out.
Yeah.
You can stay connected with us everywhere. Triggered AFPC. You can stay connected with Danny at Miss Danny Foster until that last name changes very soon here. And you can stay connected with me everywhere at Alicia Reese. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been life-changing.
Yeah.
Well, it is my absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking to you. This has been a part of when the book came out. I really wanted to spend some time talking to folks about kind of the universal messages that the book has to offer, especially around joyfulness. And this year, as the paperback just came out, I really want us to lean into what it means to raise Black children in white spaces, and bring a lot of my sociological research to bear. So this was a great opportunity to do it with such absolutely charming and beautiful young people that you are.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. We drink our water and mind our business.
Yes. My business. I just really encourage Black people not to too much mind their own business, because that's what happens with individualism. This is always like, I'm like, mind your business, but make
not
sure
not
too much, because if your neighbor suffers,
you suffer too.
You suffer too.
I love that. See, getting me together already. Thank you.
No problem.
Ooh,
Have a great day.
Yes,
Thank you. And let me know if you need pictures. I don't know what you need, but like if there are pictures and stuff.
Yeah, we'll definitely let you give you all the things and let you know how everything works. But now you can't get rid of us. So I mean, you're here.
It's my pleasure, and I will see you in Atlanta. Please do.
Yes, I'll give you. I'll send you my number.
And you all have my number.
Yes, yes.
So you know. And I'm nice with my phone. I'm not like open. So I respond. And I mean what I say.
And so do we.
Well, thank you so much. I hope this episode does for the people what it just did for me. I feel like we tell people to share. It's like I'm gonna personally be like said, like, look, you need to listen to this. Like everybody needs to listen. So thank you again so much, you guys. We will. I feel I have so much to say. I hate that we have to wrap up. We may have to bring you back. I told you we may have to spin the block on you. You back, Dr. Dias, because you just have so much more to say. I know that, and I just think that you can really help our audience. So I know we're already inviting you back. And just thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
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 Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Triggered AF. Remember, don't be consumed by your triggers. Confront it and then work to release it. Whether you leave us more triggered than you came or you're feeling like you've been open to a new perspective, our hope is that you've grown. Make sure to share this episode with a friend who's trigger happy and tag us while you're listening. We can't wait to hear from you. Until next week, pull it together, girl.